Bonjour. In this video, we shall learn about French verbs and verb conjugation. Verbs are words that express an action, state, or occurrence of thing. Verbs are important because they explain what you think and do by representing action and ways of being. You describe who you are, what you want, what you do using verbs. Without verbs, it is almost impossible to construct a coherent sentence. Verb conjugation helps you to describe yourself and others in different ways. It therefore expands your ability to communicate in that particular language. A conjugated verb is a verb which has changed to communicate one or more of the following: a person, number, gender, tense, aspect, mood, or voice. Verb conjugation is the process which refers to how a verb changes in order to show a different person, tense, number, or mood. To conjugate a verb, you have to add suffixes to the base or the infinitive form. The infinitive form of a verb is the verb in its basic form. It is the version of the verb which will appear in the dictionary. The correct suffix depends on the person or the subject in the sentence. Suffixes also depend on the number, that is singular or plural, of the subject, as well as on the tense. Tense means the time period. Is it the present, the past, or the future? Sometimes the mood also affects the suffixes. Verb conjugation simply means to change the infinitive form of a verb so that it matches the subject of the sentence. The different subjects are first person singular, which is I, second person singular, you, third person singular, he, she, or it, first person plural, we, second person plural, you, and third person plural, they. In French, these are almost the same, however, there are some slight differences as well. There are three main categories of French verbs. In French, all infinitive forms of verbs have an ending which falls into one of the following three categories: ER verbs, which end in ER, IR verbs, which end in IR, and RE verbs, which end in RE. Every verb has a stem and one of the above endings. For example, parler, which means to speak, ends in an ER verb, ends in ER, so it's an ER verb. The verb choisir, which means to choose, ends in IR, so it's an IR verb. And the verb attendre, which means to wait, ends in RE, and therefore it's an RE verb. There are different conjugation patterns for all three types of French verbs. For now, we shall deal with the ER verbs. Most ER verbs are regular and follow a specific pattern, so that if you learn one conjugation, then you will be able to conjugate almost every ER verb. In order to conjugate ER verbs, first of all, you have to remove the ER from the infinitive and then add the endings according to the subject. This is if you are conjugating the verb in the present tense. The past tense and the future tense have different endings. So, in the present tense, for the first person singular I or je, the ending is E. For tu, second person singular, it's ES. For il or he, or elle or she, or it, with the third person singular, ending is E. For nous, first person plural, ONS. Vous, second person plural, EZ. And il, which is the masculine plural, and elle, which is the feminine plural, third person plural, the ending is ENT. Here's an example of how these endings would look once they've been attached to the stem of the verb. So, using parler as an example, now parler is the infinitive form of the verb. So, according to the rules, you have to remove er from the infinitive, which will leave you parl. Then you have to add the correct endings or the suffix. As we've seen just now, the ending for je is e. So we have parle, je parle, means I speak or I am speaking. Next we have tu parles. It is the same pronunciation, but the ending is es. Parl, which is the stem, and es. Il parle or elle parle, means he speaks or she speaks or is speaking. You have to note that in French, the present and present continuous are interchangeable. So while in English there is a difference between I speak and I am speaking, in French there is no difference. Je parle can mean either I speak or I am speaking. Tu parles, maybe you speak or you are speaking, and so on. So next, the first person plural, nous. The ending is ons, so we have nous parlons. Vous parlez. Il parle or elle parle. In the third person plural, you will note that ent is silent. So overall, in the pronunciation, you will see that je, tu, il, elle, and the il, elle plural, all of them have the same pronunciation, parle. Je parle, tu parles, il, elle parle, and third person plural, also il, elle parle. It's only the pronunciation for nous, which is parlons, and vous parlez, which are different. Here are some examples using the verb parler in sentences. In the first sentence, est-ce que tu parles anglais? The subject of the sentence is tu. So, you can see tu parles anglais. Do you speak English? Non, mais je parle bien allemand. No, but I speak good German. Et Fabrice, est-ce qu'il parle anglais? And Fabrice, does he speak English? Oui, il parle bien anglais. Yes, he speaks good English. So here in these examples you can see that the verb parler has been conjugated according to the subject, tu, je or il. Other examples of er verbs include danser, trouver, garder, and many other verbs. All of these verbs will be conjugated within the same pattern as parler. Now the verb parler and most of the other er verbs are called regular verbs. Regular verbs are verbs which follow a regular pattern in their conjugation. There are some verbs in French, however, known as irregular verbs. These verbs do not conform to the usual conjugation rules and they need to be learnt separately and committed to memory by the learner. Most of these irregular verbs are very important and therefore they have to be learnt. Here we have two of the most important irregular verbs in French. The verb être, to be, and avoir, to have. As you can see, it is essential that you know these verbs off by heart as quickly as possible because these verbs are also used in the past tense. So when you are constructing a sentence in the past tense, you will need to be able to use these verbs. Here is the conjugation of the verb être in the present tense. Je suis. Tu es. Elle est or il est. Nous sommes. Vous êtes. Ils sont or elles sont. Je suis, tu es, il, elle est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, ils, elles sont. This is the conjugation of the verb avoir. meaning to have in the present tense. J'ai. In the first subject, first person singular, you can see the E from je has become an apostrophe. This is because the next word begins with a vowel. So this is j'ai, tu as, il, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont, elles ont. Here you need to note the difference in pronunciation in the third person plural. In the case of être, it is ils sont, or elles sont. The third person plural for avoir is ils ont, or elles ont. In être, it has an S pronunciation, while in avoir, it's pronounced more like Z. So, to go over the pronunciations again, j'ai, tu as, il, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, ils, elles sont. Here is a chart showing the different verb conjugations in different tenses and moods. You can see the first group, the ER verbs, IR, and the different forms of IR verbs and RE verbs. Now, why is conjugation necessary? Well, conjugation is necessary in order to be able to express yourself in more than one tone. To conjugate a verb means to change a verb and make it express something else, a different meaning to the verb. A conjugated verb expresses several different concepts. That is why it is important to use proper conjugation. Improper conjugation can end up making your sentences very confusing to the hearer. If a verb is not conjugated and left in its infinitive form, then the meaning might become unclear and even it might get lost completely. To put it simply, conjugation is important and it's necessary in order to be able to clarify your meaning in your sentences. There are many different forms of conjugation in French, including the past forms, the future forms, and also the different forms of the verbs. We have in this video only studied the ER form, which is one of the most important ones. And we've also seen two irregular verbs, two of the most important irregular verbs, être and avoir. These verbs have to be committed to memory. That's all in this video. Merci et au revoir.